Welcome to Rhythms of Faith. Welcome. We're thrilled to be joined today by Dr. Blake Leyerle, professor of early Christianity here at the University of Notre Dame. Blake, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about your study of early Christianity, especially the social and cultural history?
Well, I think I've always really been interested in ordinary things and in ordinary people and their experience of life. And I can't really remember a time when I wasn't interested in the ancient world and in early Christianity. But instead of thinking about it primarily from the perspective of the great teachers of early Christianity, the great fathers of the church, instead I'm really interested in what difference it made to people in their ordinary lives. Insofar as we can discover that. It's kind of hard to get the information, and that's what makes it fun for me, in that it's creative, in that you just have these little bits of information, you have to sort of put it together and imagine what it was like. And so I think that's what really motivates me, and I guess, too, I find it a way to reflect upon the issues of our own lives, but through this kind of prism of antiquity. So we think about ourselves when we write and teach and think, but I like to do it through the lens of 4th and 5th century early Christians.
So you're kind of also a detective.
Yes, This is the thrill of history, which is sometimes too much hidden from people. How exciting and creative it is, and you always have these new clues, and you think, oh, how does that change everything? So you read back through the evidence, and you think, oh, that changes everything. Now I see it in a different way, and that's really exciting.
I think a lot of people might wonder, like, you know, you're an historian in some sense, right? And oh, you're just finding the facts and then reporting on the facts, right? And so you mentioned that there is this creative element to the work you do. Like, how much interpretation are you doing, and what is informing your interpretation of these things that you're discovering?
Oh, that's such a fabulous question, because yes, people often think, well, we start with the facts, and in many ways, of course, we do. But the truth of the ancient world is that the facts are too few. We have too few data points. And so what we're always trying to do is think of the model or the framework into which we're going to place the data to illuminate it. So in fact, coming up with a sort of understanding of how it might have been is a crucial step in creating a history of early Christianity. And that's what makes it so dynamic and interesting, in that it changes all the time as we get a new understanding that we want to try out. Now, of course, our understanding and the framework has to be informed by the data that we do have. So it's not that we can just imagine anything, but it's that sort of control between what the constraints and the freedom of interpretation that makes it really exciting and interesting to be a historian.
Sounds just like writing a song.
You know, I suspect, you know, in this beautiful world of ours, many things are just like other things.
Right.
And that probably is right, that you can't do anything. You have to have the framework and the notes and the sort of melodic stream, and then you fit your lyrics to that framework.
That's right. Yeah.
How does collaboration with other people, because I'm hearing you talk about the framework and critiquing the frameworks that are available and developing new frameworks, how do you find yourself like relying on the work of other scholars and offering your work to other scholars? How's that been important for you?
Again, just absolutely crucial. So, you know, that's part of what research is all about. It's entering a conversation that has been going on for centuries. And it's got its new strains and its new streams. And so, yes, I learned from so many different people. I have a vibrant interest in material culture. So I'm really interested in the things, the objects, the surroundings, and lately including environmental studies very much. And then with that, also a real commitment to theoretical engagement of various sorts. So I'm interested in ways in which people think about history and how we build truth and what kind of truth is revealed by certain kinds of approaches. So, you know, so all of that is pretty important. And then, of course, in early Christianity, everything rests on a bedrock of literature, too. So literary studies is always just critically important in that involves language studies, of course, and the establishment of texts and what we can know, because, of course, all of our texts, especially someone like John Chrysostom, they come to us through centuries of monastic labor, of people copying these manuscripts over and over and over again. So anything we have from the early church is actually a testimony to their centuries of perceived usefulness and beauty.
I always find that so inspiring.
It's so inspiring because it's not like today where things are published and then they sit on shelves. They only are preserved because people wrote them out again and again and again.
Yeah,
and because people were trained all their lives to know how to write them out over and over again, which
absolutely. And then, of course, there are mistakes that enter in, and some of them are inadvertent and some of them are deliberate. So,
deliberate
teasing
mistakes.
that
I love
delivering
that.
mistakes. That's right. That they.
I've made some of those.
Yeah, and Chrysostom is so charismatic, and so a lot of people pass off their own works or the works of others under his name. So we have a lot of teasing out to do between authentic and inauthentic works.
Tell us a little bit about Chrysostom, because not everybody who listens to this is going to know who that is or why he's important. So you want to study ordinary folks. So why the Archbishop of Constantinople?
Exactly. Well, there's lots of layers to that answer. I think the thing to say mostly about John Chrysostom, now he lived from the middle of the 4th to the opening years of the 5th century. That's his dates. He ends up being the Bishop of Constantinople, but for much of his life, he's a priest in Antioch in Syria. Now, he is just tremendously interesting for social historians because he is primarily a pastor. He's interested in the moral formation of his congregations. He probably has several of them, so I usually use the plural when I talk about his congregations, because he goes from church to church to church. So he has a lot of different audiences to which he speaks. But he's interested in the moral formation, and that means that he talks a lot about their everyday life. And he's extremely psychologically insightful. At least that's what we would say. He understands this as a kind of moral, principle or formation, issues of larger formation in Christian faith. So as well as being a brilliant exegete of Scripture, he talks a lot about what people are doing in their everyday life. And most of his works that have come down to us are, in fact, homilies. And so there's over 800 authentic homilies attributed to him, and well over 1,000 by the time you put everything together. So it's this enormous body of literature. The only one who rivals him in the early church would be Augustine, and Augustine actually has fewer writings, which is always surprising to people. So that's why he's so interesting. I'm very attracted to him for these reasons. But the other truth, which is a kind of academic truth, is that he was very underread and underworked in academic circles until just a few decades ago. And you may say, well, how can that be? I mean, his works have been appreciated for centuries. He was instrumental in the Reformation, as well as in Catholic and Orthodox Christianity. So how could he have been so little utilized? And the answer really lies in the fact that he mostly preached homilies. And so these are not topically arranged. So you can't, if you want to know his thought about children, or about slavery, or about marriage, or about the theater, or about bathing customs and travel, all these sort of interesting things for social historians, you can't go to a single place. You can't go to a treatise that is on women. Right? On travel. You have to instead read through an enormous amount of homilies where he talks about so many different things everywhere. So it's a labor of love to work on John Chrysostom, and mostly until the middle of the 20th century, it was largely members of religious orders who were not concerned with things like tenure and promotion. So they had a long timeline in which they could just read and discover really interesting things. So what happened in the middle of the 20th century was first the rise of an interest in social history, this interest in history as a record of the past in its totality, in which everyday life became an object of vibrant intellectual interest. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing was computers and searchable databases. And that just opened up Chrysostom studies in a dramatic way. Now, still, so this is really important, but all of his works are now searchable, but you have to search them in Greek. So that they're less available than one would like, though there's been more and more. I know there's been more and more translations produced too in the last decades, which have just been wonderful, beautiful translations, which capture the excitement of his homilies. So it was really that opened up the field. So of course, my interest in Chrysostom is driven not only by his subject matter, but also by sort of standard academic interest, that here was someone of tremendous importance who had been very little studied. So there's just, and to this day, there's just all sorts of projects. So I didn't start out thinking I was going to dedicate my scholarly life to Chrysostom, but I find it hard to get away from him because the more I read, I come up with interesting topics and I think, oh, I'd like to explore that. And so before I know it, I've embarked on another project.
What are some of your creative extrapolations of Chrysostom, like of his personality, or like just some fun quirks about what he might have been like from your reading?
He was a kind of, I think my take on him is he was a passionate person and a man of total conviction. And so he speaks very strongly and movingly. He gets carried away. And sometimes beyond where he really wishes to go. And later you see him pulling back and say, for example, he's preaching about how people shouldn't get angry and they shouldn't curse their neighbors and their enemies. And while he's talking about it, he finds himself getting very angry. So he has to say, oh, look, I've fallen into the very thing that I'm trying to dissuade you not to do.
Great orator.
He's a great orator. So he's a kind of intense person. When you see him in icons, you can always recognize him. He is a slender man with a sort of towering head. And he referred to himself once in a rather engaging way as being a real spider head. And you can see this, and he's got this huge sort of frontal lobe development in his head. He does not talk about himself very much. So again, unlike Augustine, who is quite disclosive about his life and his difficulties and who he is, especially, of course, in the Confessions. But Chrysostom speaks almost not at all about himself. He's a very reticent person, but he was a man of deep friendships. His friendship, interestingly, with a religious woman, Olympias, who was first married and then became a deacon, is one of the great moving forces of his life. And his final letters from exile, he dies in exile. He offends everyone. That's another interesting story about his life, that he writes these letters back to her, and those letters are extremely moving for his clear love for her and concern for what she is suffering and desire to impress upon her the realities of providence, especially, and to give her hope in a very difficult situation. So he is a man of deep friendships. He is a passionate person. He does not disclose himself very much. A remarkable orator, loved by his congregations, but falls out with pretty much every powerful person in Constantinople and powerful group that one can imagine, starting with the emperor and his family, and the other bishops, the local aristocracy, the local monastics, pretty much everywhere.
Very, very Christian of him.
I can respect that, actually.
So he's a man of great principle. The other thing that's really interesting about him, he's got this huge literary output. He doesn't change his mind very much. So again, unlike Augustine,
that's make it really hard to date things.
It makes things impossible to date, and that is a real crux in scholarship. He doesn't change his mind, but the thing is, too, the things he cares about when he's a deacon, first preaching, he cares about right at the end of his life. So there is a sense of real integrity and solidity to him that I find admirable.
You've done a lot of work on him, his work on the emotions. Can you talk a little bit about his approach to emotions and how it ties to this kind of ethical formation concern?
Absolutely. That, again, he sees a lot of human motivation arising out of emotions. So he is very interested in trying to help members of his congregation do better, which is also to live happier, more fulfilling lives. But he also is really interesting. He identifies the root problem of human life. He doesn't have a concept of original sin. That's kind of Augustine's creation. They are contemporaries. But what he certainly does understand that people struggle against kind of a basic inclination that is unhelpful or damaging. And for him, this basic problem is what we might translate as inertia or laziness. It's a problem of caring, a problem of getting yourself to do the thing you know you should do, or getting yourself to stop something that you know is unhelpful. This seems to be a really helpful way to think about people's moral lives and the struggles they face today, as in the 4th century. And one of his primary ways in which he tries to help people overcome this is, in fact, the spur of emotion. So he's really interested in getting people to feel very strongly certain things and to sort of downplay others. And but he's never really totally against strong emotion, because he really prizes the forcefulness that comes from that. And of course, he finds it in Scripture too, that Scripture is a world of emotions. So he's very interested in people's emotional reaction, how it leads them to action. But he's also interested in harnessing it in his preaching. So his preaching can be seen, I think, quite productively as trying to arouse emotions. And some of those emotions, we would say, don't go there. They are strong and kind of negative feelings. But again, if you see that the basic problem is overcoming inertia, even negative feelings, if they can be properly orchestrated, I'd say, are going to be very helpful to his enterprise. So he's so astute. It's really quite moving to see how he thinks about people and their emotional lives. And when he talks about scriptural stories, one of the things he likes to do is really develop them. And that he will say, and the person was feeling this and thinking that. And when somebody said this to him, that aroused these kinds of feelings. Or when she was spoken to in this way, she might have reacted in this way, because that would be very typical after all. We all react this way, but she did not. And he likes this sort of counterfactual aspect where he will say, well, she didn't react this way. She didn't say this. She didn't even think this other thing. And so it's this really enlarging of the inner emotional life of scriptural characters, which I think is kind of riveting to read.
Right. You know? How does he think about anger? You gave us an example where he was trying to get people to have less anger towards their fellows. There's also some work. I have a friend, Cass Wepener, practical theologian in South Africa, that works on the importance of anger in preaching, in motivating us to overcome injustice. And I'm wondering, this is a little bit of a timeless thing. What does Chrysostom have to say about
it? Sounds very similar in that he says, look, anger is really useful. It motivates us, especially in issues of injustice, and that we shouldn't, he likes to label things. He said we shouldn't call it gentleness, never to get aroused at injustice. He said, really, that's just the same inertia, that we should understand that anger in certain circumstances is the appropriate response. And then he turns to one of his favorite scriptural figures, which would be the Apostle Paul, and says, look, that Paul felt rightful anger, and it moved him to act and to be strenuous and vigorous in his pursuit of justice. And that's really important. But there's still guardrails. He's very against cursing people. So it's a little bit of a problem, because Paul, in fact, does curse people. actually with abandon, as John Meyer pointed out. But Chrysostom says, no, we can't understand it that way. That would be an incorrect way to understand that. And yet curses, as we're now led to understand by people like Theodore de Bruyne, who have worked on this in the ancient world, should be understood as prayers for justice. And so even that is rooted in this pursuit of justice, especially in a world where many people, especially ordinary people, very little recourse to any kind of justice if they were treated badly. So you turn to God as the God of justice and would say, hear my prayer. And in fact, Chrysostom has to speak to members of his congregation who says, look at the psalmist, basically. And he himself will admit, some of the psalms, they are nothing but curses. So he finds himself in a little bit of a dilemma, and it's really interesting to see him work his way out of that. For sure.
Still having this, I have that experience every semester that I teach the Psalms, so it seems right.
Exactly. It is right.
I love the framing that you're giving for like this emotional element of moral formation. And it's so much the case with music that we're often after the same types of responses, right? It's like you evoke a certain emotional reaction because you want to lead people to consider this particular idea. What does Chrysostom have to say about music and what it can do, what it can't do, or...
He's a great proponent of music. And in fact, he has some beautiful passage where he says, look, everybody has to sing. And he even goes through the kinds of excuses people offer. And he says, no, it doesn't matter if you can't hold a tune, if your voice is old, if you feel you can't really sing very well, you feel awkward about this, no excuse. You're never too old, you're never too young. It doesn't matter. Nobody is supposed to hold back. Everybody should sing. And he also is a great proponent for singing in unity. He will talk it again. He's beloved by musicologists in that he says, don't try to sing over everybody else. Don't sing more slowly or more quickly than other people. Stay with the program, as it were. And what he really wants is people to sing at home. And this is one of the sort of segues between the great church and the household. And that he says, look, you need to sing at home. And partly he says this because it's in the letters of Paul that people sing spiritual songs.
Right.
And so he's really interested in increasing that at home. And he says, look, everybody can do this. They should sing what they sing in church. And you think, well, people say, well, how can I do that? And he says, look, you sing the refrains of the Psalms. And you do it over and over again. He said, all you have to do, minimal attention.
Yeah, right.
Pay a small amount of attention in church and then sing this at home. And then he also talks about the angelic songs, which are probably the Gloria, perhaps some other parts of the Eucharistic
maybe
liturgy.
the Sanctus or something.
Maybe the Sanctus. It's a little bit hard. He doesn't say more than that, so we're not quite sure about what exactly he means, but he certainly means the psalm refrains. Now, why does he want them to do that? Well, it is in Scripture, so that's important.
Yeah.
But then he is interested in opposing regular practice, which seems to have been singing secular songs, especially songs from the theater, which often had unedifying, shall we say, lyrics.
Yeah.
So he's interested in rejecting that and supplanting it with Christian songs. And when he talks about this, it's really interesting because he points out how people sing all the time in their daily life. So he talks about how workers sing to pass the time and make repetitive labors more manageable. Or you sing to instill a rhythm. So he talks about sailors singing, or farmers doing agricultural work, or travelers singing. Women weaving, apparently, that often women, when they got together to do the sort of handwork at home, would sing together.
They had songs.
Yes,
Yeah.
and where we have information about this, it sounds like most of those songs are based on ancient mythology. So he would like to Christianize that practice for sure.
Yeah.
So he's promoting psalms as a way to kind of Christianize the airwaves,
Yeah.
as it were.
Cool.
And he also really, his program for domestic religion is in many ways a kind of immersive environment. And it's a kind of wraparound. And he seems to understand intuitively what the neuropsychologists seem to have told us recently, which is that singing, it activates other areas of your brain. And so that when you sing, you use a different area of your brain and it instills other feelings. He also definitely thinks the psalm refrains are kind of like doctrine in a capsule. So, for example, on Easter, you sing that verse from Psalm 118.
Yeah.
This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. He says, it's got everything you need. Just sing that and you know everything you need to know about this day. You know, so it's not just convenient. He says basically it's got everything you need to understand this day.
Yeah.
And so he's a great proponent of singing. He does not, however, like instrumental music. Sorry, musicians everywhere. He associates musical instruments with particularly pagan ritual and also Jewish ritual. So he says, no, Christians are different, that yes, we play a lyre, but the lyre is our own bodies. And so this also is the roots of Eastern liturgical practice, which favors the unaccompanied voice. And that seems to be his mode as well.
Very cool. Thank you.
I want to turn to the furnishing aspect of your recent book, Christians at Home, which does talk about singing as well a little bit, but I want to have you talk to us. I think I remember there are 3 sacred environments or sacred-like environments. There are 3 parallels in the domestic home for Chrysostom to the liturgical space. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
I'd be very happy to. I got interested in this project of Christians at Home because several times in Chrysostom's huge homiletic output, he tells people to make their houses into churches. And I wondered, was there a program? And the more I looked into it, the more I thought, oh, there's a big program here. And the program revolves, as you said, it involves 2 primary spaces in the household and 3 objects. And the 3 objects are the table, the bed, and the box, is what I translated as, though it might also be a chest. It's a little hard to know what it is. So these are the 3 objects, and they all have sort of ecclesiastical correlates. So the table, we might think, oh, that's the Eucharistic table. But no, that's not something that can be replicated in the household. So he doesn't actually speak very much about food rituals, except for grace. So he's interested in grace, but there's no food action that is reserved to the church. So, but the table is important because it's the place of prayer and solemnity, especially after dinner, but also primarily the place of scriptural discussion. So the table at home is likened to the bema or to the platform, the raised platform from which preachers spoke the word and preached their homilies. So it's at the table that he imagines the household talking about scripture and sharing the lessons learned in church. And he's quite explicit. He says, you know, you take what you learned in church and you take it home and you talk it over at the meal. And you tell people who weren't able to get to the liturgy what was said, and that you teach your children the scriptural stories. And he lays out the program. And in fact, as he tells fathers particularly how to tell stories to their children, he basically lays out his own techniques of preaching. So there's a one-to-one correlation, it seems to me, between his own preaching in church and what he imagines parents doing in the household. Mostly fathers, but also mothers are understood to participate in this as well, sometimes more equally, sometimes in a more hierarchical fashion. So that's the table, largely. The bed is a place of prayer, both at the beginning and the end of the day. At the end of the day, it's also the place where you review your actions during the day with a specific recollection of the judgment. And I make an argument, therefore, that Chrysostom's domestic program is really designed to underscore a distinctively Christian temporal horizon, that at all moments Christians are to remember the judgment, and that should seem real and proximate, immediate, that this is coming. So he says at the moment you get up in the morning, when you say your prayers, you're to think about the end of the day and how you're going to return, and you will give account to God for everything you have done. So that you live your life in this awareness of the judgment that is coming. And that sounds pretty repressive. I know it does. I know it does. But in some ways, he is in the process of formation. And so it really is to tell people about the sort of Christian truth and the way the Christians think about the world, and that there is another world, and that this is coming, and it's very, very real. And so he's trying to really instill that message very strongly in people's minds, as well as encouraging them to do right and to avoid what is not right. So that's the bed. And then beside the bed is to be set up, he says, this chest or box. This is standard household equipment. Boxes, they had a lot of boxes. They were used to store clothes and utensils of various sorts. They could also be used for money. And it is in the sense of money that he really thinks of this. This is a box to collect alms, and he wants people to deposit a small amount of money in the box beside their bed before they pray. And he likens this to the treasury of the church. And of course, it goes back to Paul's admonitions to the Corinthians to lay aside a little bit of money daily and then bring it to the church. So it's scriptural, but it also is part of this recollection of the obligation to the poor, which is one of his major ethical messages. But it's also about, of course, moral formation. It's this issue of almsgiving and personal redemption, offsetting sin, perhaps, and sort of recollection again of the judgment that is to come. So that the box as the treasury, the bed as a place of prayer. It's also, of course, a place of repose and restfulness, which he finds important. It's linked in some sense to the ultimate bed, which is the grave. So again, it's this idea of the timeline of Christians in a way that we don't find very comfortable to think about, but is very much part of the early church. And then, of course, the table where there's a lot of action. Oh, I should also mention the table is a site of hospitality, of course. And that's also connected with the box. That's really important because of opening up your house to bring other people in, or as he says, sending meals out to people. And that is an area in which he understands women to be very much in the lead. So it's when he talks about hospitality, their agency as ritual actors really comes to the fore in interesting and important ways, it seems to me.
What inspired you to write the book? Our wonderful producer, Matt, when he was assembling the questions, noticed the dates that you were writing the book, which was during COVID times.
Absolutely.
And so you're spending a lot of time at home, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And so,
Well, I had been thinking about the make your house into a church for a long time, but it was exactly that. The pressures of the pandemic, when houses became all sorts of things, including spaces of worship, that really made me think, oh, this would be a great project to pursue, because we are all experimenting with making our houses into churches. And what does this mean? And our own sort of sense, it seems to me, of perhaps inexperience or a lack of confidence in our agency that we were really able to do that.
That awkwardness.
That awkwardness. And Chrysostom is really interesting because he is quite controlling in many ways. You know, he definitely has a program that he wants to instill, but he's also strongly empowering because he presents people in his congregation saying, look, I can't do this. I don't know scripture. I can't do this. I feel awkward. I'm not a monk. I'm not a priest. I can't do this. And he says, of course you can. So he says, anybody can do this. This isn't just for the ordained people. This is for all Christians. This is a program of universal ethical formation. And everybody must do this. And you must especially teach your children. And what he wants, of course, is to extend the church, to have that kind of wrap-around immersive experience. And, you know, he knows people don't come to church all the time. They can't, perhaps, or they don't.
Yeah.
They come, as he says, optimally maybe once a week, maybe twice a week. Many people once a month. Some, he says many a few times a year.
Yeah.
And that is all. So he knows if he can make the household into a church, the impact is going to be hugely more sustained.
Yeah.
And that will change people. And I find it really extraordinary that his program of formation, it isn't just pre-baptismal catechesis. It's not just this temporary, get people into the group and then they can make their own way. It's this constant issues of formation and elevation really in the faith.
Yeah.
And that's just really interesting. And some of his observations about teaching children especially, and how you really raise your children to be Christian all the way through, as we might say,
right,
is a really interesting thing. And he has great confidence in the program and in the immersive environment. Has a beautiful imagery. He says, look, the church is like a perfumery. And he says, even if you just pass by a perfume shop in the street, your clothes will pick up the smell.
Yeah.
And he says, this is what it means
Wow.
to come to church. He says, you just need to come and it will change you. He has this huge confidence in the ritual efficacy. Now, that's counterbalanced in him. He's also very much a preacher of effort. He says, you need to make an effort. You need to try this. You need to do things.
Well, I love the sort of tension between
balance.
his humility and the agency that he is imparting on his congregations. It's like those things go hand in hand.
This is it. So you have to have an effort. Again, he's always against this sort of inertia problem. So you have to make an effort. You can make an effort, but grace is very real, that this is not just resting on your effort, that it will happen. It is assured. You can't, and he speaks the same way about hearing Scripture. He says, if you hear the words of Scripture, it will change you. But you just have to hear it. You have to be open to it. You have to tell your children. You have to really let it enter into you in some sense. So I thought about it a lot during the pandemic, for sure, when we were all at home. And my own family was very, very accommodating.
That's great.
I often, as I say in my acknowledgments, I have to thank them for never imposing a limit on how many of my sentences could begin. John Chrysostom said. Or in the 4th century. They were very tolerant.
Humility and agency of your family
there you go.
well.
Yeah.
It was profound.
What's one myth about early Christianity that you would like to root out of our collective consciousness?
That's a big question.
No, we're limiting you to one today.
Okay.
Have you back next
All right.
week.
I will put two together.
Okay.
One is the idea that in the early church, everybody agreed on everything. That it was a kind of time of unanimity and concord.
Great homogeny.
And in a way, of course, that is a beautiful ideal. In a way, though, it makes them look very different from ourselves, which I think is not helpful. And part of that non-homogeneity, I think, would be this sense of the vibrant interaction or contribution of ordinary people and lay understandings of Christianity. That although what we mostly have is the testimony of the clerical writers, that we shouldn't assume that they speak for all Christians, and that what there is embedded in their writings, if we look for it patiently and ferret it out like detectives, is that we can see other understandings of Christianity. And it isn't that they are only half Christian or imperfectly formed, but rather that there's a really vital negotiation going on about what does it mean to live a Christian life? And what are the aspirations that really drive people? And that their voices are as truthful and as important to hear as the great formulations of the church teachers. And many of them are not rooted or not primarily about doctrine, but they are about maybe embodied doctrine, which is practice. And it's about the family and the household and immediate needs and a kind of a more proximate horizon, which is about keeping your family safe and ensuring its prosperity and doing the next thing that comes comes to hand.
That's just beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have a fun question that we've been asking all of our guests, which is that if you were an animal, what would you be? And it could be either, something that you aspire to be or what you are now, and whatever you like.
This is so hard. I have a huge love of animals, and most of it would be, I guess, aspirational for me. But when I thought about an animal I would be, I think I might have to say that a manatee would be an animal.
My daughter just loves manatees.
Yeah, they're peaceful and slow moving swimmers. Lovers of lettuce.
Yeah.
All of this is important. I think an aspirational animal might be a crow, I think. Observant and communicative. And
they can learn processes.
They can learn things and imitative.
Yeah.
And agile, swift.
Yeah.
And also collectors of shiny objects.
Yeah.
In the box.
Exactly, in the box. That's right. Playful.
Yeah.
So I think maybe somewhere between maybe the manatee and the crow, but I couldn't do the carrion thing.
Yeah. Those are really good ones. Very, very kind of off-grid.
Yeah. I don't know.
And crows are bringers of gifts, and they love to receive gifts and they love to give gifts. And,
yes, they're very interactive. My wonderful stepdaughter had a long standing game with a crow in her backyard, and the crow would leave her a gift, and she said, I knew I had to pick it up and take it home.
Wow.
And then leave another gift, and then the crow would come and take the gift
That's
away.
Unbelievable.
Yes, and so they would watch for each other and have this gift exchange,
Yeah.
which
so cool.
was just beautiful thing. Yeah. And then their imitative abilities.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for, I think you met your aspirations today. Thanks for bringing us many gifts and for also imitating Chrysostom for us and bringing us some insight into his way of thinking about Christianity.
Well, thank you so much. I've had a great time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. And thank you for joining us here on the Rhythms of Faith podcast. We'll see you next time.